Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I've talked about homeowners associations from time to time, and I've pointed out that many people are unhappy living in a place where there's a homeowners association. And many people don't know what it means to be in a homeowner association controlled neighborhood until they get there, and it's too late to understand how much they hate it. But the things are legal in most states, and what happens is there's a nice community that gets built, and when they're building it, the builder decides that a homeowners association might increase the property values by making things in the neighborhood more controllable, more uniform. And so what they'll do is they'll build it into the property deed itself that says that buying this property, you agree to enter into an agreement with all the neighbors. You're going to pay fees, and you're going to have an organization that runs the place. It's a little like almost like a local private government. And it'll say things such as like how you mow your lawn or what color you can paint your house. I'm not making this stuff up. What kind of plants you can put in your front yard. And so some people will buy a house because it looks nice and they're in a neighborhood that looks nice, and they move in and the realtor says, oh, by the way, it's a homeowner association. People go, oh, okay, whatever. And they go, well, it's going to cost you some money. You got to pay fees and dues, whatever. People go, yeah, whatever. And then they find out that there's actually rules and regulations that go along with those fees you're paying. And suddenly people realize, oh, and it turns out if you get the wrong people on the HOA board, your life can become a living heck. So I've just personally made it a goal in life to never live someplace governed by an HOA. And I know people who like them, by the way. Some people like them. But I suspect a lot of it has to do with who's on the board and how the board is run and how insane the rules are. Out of Las Vegas, Jason sent me, he said, Steve, I know you love HOAs. Article by Darcy Spears for KTNV television. Homeowner beats HOA in fight that went to the Nevada Supreme Court. Alongside the American flag and patriotic bunting, a banner unfurls across the roofline of Jonathan Frederick's home. His attorney said somebody finally has to stand up against these HOAs. He fought hard for what was right, for truth, justice, and the American way. The banner proclaiming the Rancho Bel Air HOA is guilty of fraud proves that Frederick is not one to shy away from a fight. He said, when you're right, you're right. It's that simple. In addition to this banner that says that they're guilty of fraud, there are a couple other new residents in Frederick's front yard, large metal pink flamingos. And apparently that is an iconic anti-HOA symbol. I was not privy to this symbology. Frederick's battle to prove he's not part of the guard-gated HOA he lives in has lasted nearly 6 years and cost him more than $300,000. This was a simple dispute, he said. Are you or aren't you in the HOA? So here's the thing. He actually lived in an area that he says wasn't governed by the HOA, and the HOA said it was. Should be pretty straightforward, but somehow it made it to the Nevada Supreme Court. So this story dates back to 2016, and Frederick's home is kind of unusual because his home is inside an area apparently governed by an HOA. But I guess the area is called Rancho Bel Air, and there's a dividing line that Frederick literally painted down the middle of his street at his property line. And he says the community is made up of 2 units that were developed at different times. Frederick followed a decades-old paper trail to find proof that homeowners like him in Unit 1 were never officially part of the HOA. He said documents proved I was right, but he didn't know it at first because the developer for Unit 2 sent all homeowners a letter telling them that they were part of the HOA. So somewhere along the line, he got this letter saying, you're part of the HOA. And he did some research, and it didn't look like he was. But see, once you're a member of it, if you in fact are, you're bound by their rules, you got to pay their dues, all that stuff. And by the way, if you don't pay your dues, they'll sometimes actually seek to foreclose on your property and say that they can do that because they can put a lien on you and that kind of thing. So Frederick paid the dues in good faith just because he wanted to be on the safe side until he found out that the letter itself wasn't official. So he said, they lied to me at my closing. My title company screwed me. I paid for them to protect me. They did anything but. When he stopped paying the $200 monthly assessments, they sent him a foreclosure notice. They said, if you don't pay our assessments, we're going to foreclose on you. And he said, and this is a quote, in a pig's eye. It's old school. He took the case to trial and won, but of course the HOA appealed. And this is how it wound up in front of the Nevada Supreme Court. So in case you're curious, the HOA is an organization that should know better. But they take dues from all their members, and that's the war chest. So basically, all the members of the HOA were wasting their money pursuing this frivolous appeal. He said they've got a God complex, that everybody has to do what they say no matter what. Unit 2 developer and HOA board member spoke to the TV station, said, "We are not one of the Gestapo associations that you read about." Well, if they're not, why are you pursuing this guy who's not a member of your group? And this board member says, he bought into a guard-protected community, and now he wants someone else to pay for his share of that. When reached over the phone for the story, the man now had nothing new to add on the Supreme Court ruling. The Nevada Supreme Court agreed with a trial jury that Frederick did not have to pay and that the HOA committed fraud by negligent misrepresentation when they collected dues from him. Frederick says, "I was right. They were wrong, and they tried to steamroll over me, and it's just not going to happen." In a pig's eye. The amount of money that you spent, I imagine, would far exceed any HOA dues that you would have had to pay all along. Yes? And he answered, "Way beyond it. But if you know somebody is stealing from you," and that's the whole point. The guy did this on principle. And so he says that's how he saw it, and he couldn't let it happen no matter the cost. And unfortunately, it did cost the man a lot of money. The costs are still rising as Frederick is still fighting to get the HOA to pay him an original jury award of $15,000. So, summarize the procedural aspects. They sought to foreclose on him for non-payment of his fees. He sued them for negligent misrepresentation, and a jury sided with him and said, HOA owes you $15,000 and you don't owe them any money. The HOA appealed that up and it made it to the Nevada Supreme Court. And the Nevada Supreme Court agreed and said, no, the jury is correct. The man's entitled to $15,000 and does not owe the HOA any money. And unfortunately, that fight cost him $320,000 in fees. $320,000 in attorney fees and court costs. So there's going to be a hearing in court coming up. Apparently, because that's what often happens if you take a case to trial and it gets appealed. A lot of times at the higher level, they'll send it back down and they'll say, we're sending back down for an entry of a judgment in conformance with everything that's gone on before us. And so it might be the man's entitled to some of his fees and costs back from the defendants. It's possible. I don't know. It depends on what the legal theories were and so on. But the short and long of it is that Frederick himself has spent $320,000 pursuing this thing as a matter of principle. And I've mentioned before that I have mixed feelings about a lot of this stuff. Because I've had people come into my office and say, Steve, I want to file a lawsuit on a matter of principle. And if you had total omniscience and could, see the future, and this man is sitting in your office and he says, look, they're trying to charge me fees I don't owe them. I want to sue them. If you could stop the moment in time and say, do you understand that you're going to win a $15,000 judgment and the right to stop paying your fees, but it's going to cost you $320,000, okay? Most people would actually say, you know something? $200 a month for the rest of my life is going to be less than $320,000. But apparently this guy says it's worth it. He said it's worth it. So I respect the guy. I salute the guy. I really do. But you have to understand that most people, when they're alone with their thoughts in that quiet moment, whatever time of day it is, night or day, wherever you might be, when you're thinking deep down about your life, most people would say, you know something, it would grind me, but I wouldn't want to pay the $320,000 just to prove I'm right here. Most people wouldn't do that. Most people couldn't afford to do that. So the fact that he could afford to do it, the fact that he did do it, and by the way, he didn't know going in he's going to win. He thought he was going to win. He hoped he's going to win, but you never know. So he won. and it cost him $320,000. So my hat's off to the guys. And so again, homeowner beats an HOA in a fight that went to the Nevada Supreme Court, cost him $320,000. And his name is Jonathan Frederick. And I salute the man, as do most people who've ever dealt with homeowners or condo boards, but homeowners associations in particular. Most people, after you've been through one, don't want to deal with it anymore. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. The most important thing about goals is having one.